The biggest prisoner swap between Russia and the West since the end of the Cold War has taken place. The exchange came after years of negotiations between at least 6 countries. Those freed include the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and also the former US Marine Paul Whelan, as well as prominent Kremlin critics and anti-war campaigners. US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are expected to meet the freed Americans in the coming hours when they arrive back in the United States. This was the scene in Moscow, where Russian President Vladimir Putin gave the freed Russian citizens a hero's welcome. North America correspondent Barbara Miller has the latest from Washington.
This was a massive deal involving multiple countries, and a couple of dozen people released under this prisoner swap. 16 released from either detention in Russia or Belarus. They were imprisoned and convicted on a number of charges, including treason, espionage and spreading false information. For the most part, they deny those charges. Among the 16, the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and a former US Marine, Paul Whelan. He's been in detention in Russia for close to 6 years. He was detained and accused of espionage when he was in Russia attending a wedding. Now, the US and its allies have had to agree to hand back a number of Russians. 8 Russians in total have already arrived back in Moscow. They include the convicted assassin Vadim Krasikov. He was convicted of murdering a Chechen separatist in a Berlin park and was serving a life sentence in Germany. German authorities have said it was a very difficult decision for them to agree as part of this deal that he should be allowed to go free. Joe Biden speaking on this deal, flanked by some family members of those released, paid tributes to the strength of the allies who worked together to achieve this.
This deal would not have been made possible without our allies. Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Norway, and Turkey, they all stepped up and they stood with us. They stood with us. And they made bold and brave decisions. Released prisoners being held in their countries who are justifiably being held, and provided logistical support to get the Americans home. So for anyone who questions whether allies matter, they do.
I think Joe Biden making a political point there. Donald Trump, as we know, has said that Vladimir Putin could do whatever the hell he wanted to any NATO allies who didn't pay their dues. Joe Biden, someone who really prides himself on his working relationships with the international community. Donald Trump, we've seen going on his social media platform suggesting that this was a bad deal, and there always are bad deals that are made and could set a dangerous precedent. And of course, that is a question for the White House. Does this set a precedent? Does this incentivize a country like Russia to, in the eyes of the US, wrongfully detain people in the hope of striking a future deal? The White House has said that that's a risk, that it's weighed up, and has decided that the reward is worth it. Now, the 3 American citizens who were freed as part of this deal are on their way back to the US. They're going to be met very late tonight local time by both President Biden and by Vice President Kamala Harris.
Barbara Miller there. Hezbollah says its conflict with Israel has entered a new phase following the assassination of its senior commander, Fouad Shukur, in Lebanon. The militant group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has promised a powerful retaliation against Israel for the strike. Eric Twarchek reports.
Addressing the funeral of Hezbollah military commander Fouad Shukur by video link, the group's leader Hassan Nasrallah says Israel has crossed a number of red lines and Hezbollah will be forced to respond. He says Hezbollah will resume firing rockets and missiles at Israeli towns and military sites while separately working on a response to the assassination of Fouad Shukur in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Hassan Nasrallah says the multi-front war that Israel is currently engaged in against Hezbollah in Lebanon, against Iran-backed militias in Iraq, and against the Houthis in Yemen has entered a new phase. That possibly includes something from the Islamic Republic of Iran itself, which says it is also preparing a response against Israel. This one for the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, who was visiting Tehran this week. The Israeli government hasn't taken responsibility for that killing. It says it won't be discussing it, but Israel's military says it has confirmed that it killed another Hamas leader, the military commander Mohammed Daif, in Gaza in July. Mohammed Daif was thought to have been one of the key architects of the October 7 attacks in southern Israel. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the country is prepared to deal with any attacks, and the security advice for most Israeli citizens remains unchanged.
Well, the federal opposition has echoed government calls for Australians to get out of Lebanon. At least 15,000 Australians remain in the country, and the federal government is warning evacuating them could be more challenging than in previous conflicts. Political reporter Nicole Hegarty is in our Parliament House studio. Morning, Nicole. The opposition has added to these calls for Australians to leave now.
Morning, Lorna. That's right. They say that if Australians in the region don't heed the messages that have been out there since October and strengthened in the recent weeks, that they are potentially putting the lives of potential evacuating staff, those missions which would be operated by other Australians, they're putting their lives in potential danger if it is left to them to arrange evacuation flights, if they are indeed at all possible. The government highlighting the potential for significant difficulties in terms of running and operating those evacuation flights if there is in a need for them in the future. As you say, this comes amid increased or intensifying tensions and fears about what may be next in the region as a result of continuing and rising conflict. There's at least 15,000 Australians in the region, but it's believed that number could actually be up to double that. The opposition's shadow foreign minister, Simon Birmingham, encouraging and pleading with Australians in the region to make their way home.
If you stay and borders close and situations become dangerous and you are unable to get out, then you are asking other Australians to put themselves in danger to get you out. And that's just not a fair proposition.
So, Nicole, how are Australians in the area responding?
Well, there are a significant number in the region, particularly at this time of year. They're over there for the summer, and there's mixed reviews or mixed views among them as to whether they will heed the advice of the government, or it's difficult to do so because they have family connections there and feel a sense of need and responsibility to provide assistance to relatives over there. So mixed reviews or views as to what will happen. Some are saying that it is difficult to heed the advice and leave family members behind. Take a listen.
If you're used to the situation over here, it's like another day in a way. But in saying that, the situation does flare up at certain times. So we're keeping a good eye on things.
So the advice has been since October for Australians and residents not to travel to the region. That advice is now to leave the region immediately and still do not travel there, with the particular concerns from the government about that large number of people in the region. Lorna?
Nicole Hegarty, thank you.